So I've been sent this video from Martyn Iles called "Why Aren't Minor Parties the Answer?" Martyn Iles from the Australian Christian Lobby. Let's have a watch and then we'll have a discussion about it.
When it comes to the question of minor parties, again, for me, it's the people, not parties thing. There are people out there who are saying, oh, I'm not going to vote major ever again. I'm going to go in and vote minor. Here's the problem. Man, I would just hate that to happen in a situation where your ballot is in front of you in that election booth, and on that ballot is a couple of names of incumbent politicians who are absolute warriors for truth and righteousness. And you're sitting there saying, I'm never going to vote major again. I'm going to put a number one next to this guy who I've never met, who we know nothing about, who has no track record to spite the majors. And those two people on my ballot who I otherwise could have voted for, they needed my support and I didn't give it to them. Now that would be the worst possible thing. Because here's the reality. With those minor parties, there are some good people, but there are also some bad people with bad anti-Christian values running in those minor parties, just as you find in the Liberals, just as you find in Labor. So you have to exercise tremendous discernment that you're not actually giving a vote to somebody who has anti-Christian values and overlooking someone who has actually been in those party room meetings, standing up for truth and righteousness for the last 3 years. And just because you want to spite the majors, you're voting on party lines and mucking it all up. You shouldn't. You need to vote for people, individuals. Because let's say some minor parties get into the Senate, and I'm perfectly fine with that. I actually, in principle, have nothing against the minors. In fact, if they had the balance of power and made it a little bit difficult for the government to get legislation through, I'm kind of fine with that. There's no problem. But here's the thing. You could get the same problem you have with the majors, which is that you might get the wrong people elected and having control of the agenda politically of those minor parties. And we really want to avoid that. So just actually continue to look at the people, not the parties. That is so, so crucial. That's the theme here.
All right. I've got enormous respect for Martyn Iles. He's the managing director for the Australian Christian Lobby. He fought for Israel Folaal's religious freedom right, and he continues to fight that battle today in trying to get a really good legislation for religious freedom for the whole country. Now, he made some very good points there. He criticised the slogans, put the majors last, and in another video similar to this, he also said, he criticised put the sitting member last. Now, he's actually correct in what he's saying. What those slogans are doing is actually going to damage some good candidates that are in the major parties. And there are good ones that have been fighting for us. Craig Kelly actually came from the major party. George Christensen, he was in the Nationals, part of the coalition, that's government. There's another Liberal MP, I forgot his name, in the lower house. There's people like Bob Katter. He's been fighting for jab freedom as well. He's a recent convert. There's also another 7 senators that fought for jab freedom, 5 of which were from the coalition. This is the nuance which isn't being captured when you just do broad slogans. Now, I understand marketing. I understand, that happens sometimes. People get caught in the crossfire. But we do need a solution on this. And I've been thinking about this for a little while now. In an ideal world, in each individual person that's casting a vote, we call them electors, people would actually research every person that's running in their electorate. And they'd, maybe if they had the opportunity to reach them, they'd call them, they'd read up on their policies, they'd see their voting record. But this is the reality, guys. People don't have time, as you know. I don't need to tell you this. When it comes to how to research a candidate, a lot of people don't know how to do it. And even if they did, some of them don't even have the time to do it, whether they've got kids, a mortgage they're going to pay for, working 1, 2, 3 jobs. This is a problem. And this is how the major parties have been able to take advantage of your lack of knowledge for so long. That's why on the 4th of May, I'm coming out with these How to Vote cards under the Turning Point Australia brand. It's taking that problem, that lack of nuance from those slogans, and it's solving it. It's giving people more information. So Martyn Iles is right to point out that these slogans lack nuance, but the solution I'm putting forward actually fixes that problem, because it looks at the How to Vote card for every single seat in the nation, and we're providing you our recommendation for how we think you should vote so that we don't repeat what happened the last 2 years with lockdowns, mandates, passports, and every other draconian measure we saw from the premiers and the Prime Minister. These are just recommendations. It's going to be a good basis point for a lot of people who don't understand the system, so that they can look at it and be like, yep, I trust Joel, or I trust the Turning Point brand, and I'm going to follow the card. Or what you can do is you can look at it and you can use it as a basis point to research some of the candidates where you're not quite sure, like, Joel, why did you do 1, 2, or 3? Maybe you can shift it, and that's great, beautiful. We're here so that we can educate you and so that we can empower you. We're not here to dictate. We want to lift up Australia because a rising tide raises all ships. Instead, as a suggestion, could I just say, why don't we use the hashtag defund the majors? Why? Because every vote that you cast this election federally, it gives the parties that get it $2.90. If they get a vote above 4% in an electorate, they are entitled to funding because we have publicly funded elections. They get $2.90. In fact, the Liberal Party and the Labor Party got something around $25 to $27 million last election from your vote. So your vote actually does count. And if you're giving it to the major parties, that's money that minor parties don't actually have to expand and to fight future elections on a state or a federal level. So let's say there's a candidate in a major party that you really like, but you really spite what their party has done, but you like what they've done. What you can do is just don't put them as your first preference, your primary vote, your number one on the ballot. And that's something you'll see on the Turning Point How to Vote cards. Because what that does is, every one vote that they get, primary vote that they get, that money doesn't go to the candidate, it goes to the party. So if you put them as a number 2 or a number 3 or a number 4, and you put some Freedom Party people that you know, like and trust, or ones that we've recommended above them, you're not hurting their chances necessarily of getting in, but you're allowing them the situation where they can go back to their party and say, see, people weren't putting me as number 1 because of what you did. I tried to warn you. That's going to really allow the MPs that you like to have the ammunition to go back after this election and say, hey, this is why we lost votes in the primary area. People weren't prepared to give us their first vote. Now let me address the topic of Martyn Iles and some of the things he put forward. Martyn, love your work, but one of the problems we've got here is that you're being censored really badly. Let me give you an example. Your Martyn Iles Facebook page has 207,000 followers. This Turning Point Australia page has about 82,000 followers. But your video, even though it's the same video I just watched here, and it's in this video, unedited, your video will get less views on your page than my page. Why? Because you're being heavily censored. You know this. You've got more reach across emails, across YouTube. You've got 100,000 subscribers on YouTube. You've got heaps of people on Instagram and other platforms. But you're still being heavily censored. And this is the fundamental problem that I see. Every single Freedom Party, which I have mentioned, all 10 of them, they are all for freedom of speech online. You cannot say the same for Liberal, Labor, Greens, National. They do not have that policy. The vast majority of individual MPs in those parties also have never raised their voice on this issue. I think that when it comes to this, you need to recognize that these freedom parties are onto something. They're fighting for your right to tell us, or people in freedom parties, that other people shouldn't vote for them. They're fighting for that video to get more reach, even if it's against them. This is the fundamental problem we're seeing here. It doesn't matter if you believe this or this or this. If you can't talk about it, if we can't have that battle of ideas, we're all stuffed. And that's the situation we see ourselves in right now. And I don't see many MPs at all, in fact nil, fighting in the major parties for freedom of speech online. It's just not a thing. I think maybe a year ago when Craig was an MP, Craig Kelly, he put a religious freedom bill forward, but the major parties slapped it down. They didn't put it up for a vote. This is the problem, Martyn, and I have enormous respect for you, but unfortunately we're in a situation where our religion, Christianity, our way of life, our conservative values, they're due for extinction. I mean, and it's all happening because we haven't smartened up to how the system's working here. Now you've got enormous experience, and I respect you for that, and you've got years of experience on me. But I can't help but see this is an existential problem to Christianity and conservative values and our way of living and the Australian way of life. But look, I have enormous respect for you, Martyn, and the ACL for all the work you've done to date. I especially have respect for you guys for saying that you're going to be challenging those 5 MPs, you're going to be campaigning against them for what they did on the Religious Freedom Bill, and I have enormous respect to see what else you guys are going to be doing in the future. And I wish you all the best of luck. And in classic fashion,